The wind howled through the bare branches that night, rattling the shutters of my old farmhouse. I had lived alone for years, the silence of this lonely house my only companion. But then, there it was, a soft, hesitant knock at the door. My heart leapt. At first, I thought it was a neighbor lost in the storm, but the pause between knocks felt different. Timid. Deliberate. I opened the door to darkness and rain, only to see a small bundle swaddled in an old quilt, trembling against the cold. "Baby." A note pinned to her tiny chest. "Please keep her safe. I'll return when the world allows me." I froze, the words blurring as tears stung my eyes. Who could leave a newborn on my doorstep in the dead of night? Fear and curiosity collided inside me. Was the mother nearby? Or worse, in danger? I wrapped the tiny figure in my own shawl and carried her inside, the wood floor creaking beneath my careful steps. Every shadow in the room seemed alive, every gust of wind sounding like whispers through the house. I unfolded the note, hands trembling. The ink was smudged, the handwriting delicate, urgent, filled with silent pleas I could barely understand. The quilt smelled faintly of lavender and something older, something that belonged to another time. I knew then that this child's life, and perhaps mine, had just changed forever. I placed her in the old cradle by the fireplace, its wood worn and familiar, and sat beside her, my fingers tracing the tiny shape of her hand. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering the roof, wind rattling the windows like ghosts desperate to be heard. Every second that passed heightened the tension, the weight of the unknown pressing against my chest. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why me? I glanced at the note again. "Please keep her safe. I'll return when the world allows me." My mind raced with questions that had no answers. 55 years ago, or maybe even longer, the words might have seemed simple. But tonight, soaked and trembling, they were a summons into a mystery I could not refuse. The baby stirred, her tiny cries echoing in the empty house, and something inside me stirred too. A fierce, protective instinct I hadn't known existed. Hours passed. I checked the locks, peered through the fogged windows, listened for any footsteps outside. The darkness seemed thicker, almost sentient, as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I whispered to her, my voice breaking the silence. "Don't worry, little one. You're safe here. I promise." And in that moment, I realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to enter my life. The arrival of this tiny stranger had pulled open the doors to secrets, heartbreak, and a story that would take decades to unfold. Little did I know, the woman who left her child on my doorstep that night would return 55 years later, bringing with her truths I wasn't prepared to face, and a daughter whose life had always belonged to someone else. By morning, the storm had passed, but the questions it left behind had only grown louder. The baby slept quietly in the cradle, her tiny chest rising and falling like a fragile secret of the night. I gazed at her, wondering who had entrusted this life to me. The note still lay on the table, smudged and fragile, a silent plea from a mother I had never met. There were no names, no addresses, nothing to guide me except the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on my chest. I whispered her new name aloud. "Anna. You shall be Anna." Raising Anna was unlike anything I had imagined. Every coo, every cry, every small milestone carried the dual weight of joy and mystery. In the town, whispers began to spread. Who was the mother? Why had she abandoned her child? Every neighbor's question cut deeper than the storm's chill ever could. I guarded Anna fiercely, hiding the note in a locked drawer, protecting both the child and the fragile secret of her arrival. But hints of her past kept surfacing. The quilt she had been wrapped in bore a delicate embroidery I didn't recognize, a pattern worn but precise, as if carrying a message. Sometimes a faint scent, lavender mixed with another, older fragrance, clung to the fabric. Small things easily overlooked, yet impossible to ignore. Each of these tiny details whispered. Someone somewhere had loved her enough to ensure she survived. And I could not help but feel the silent weight of another's eyes on my life, watching, waiting, perhaps hoping I would succeed in keeping her safe years past. I raised Anna as my own, loving her fiercely while the questions about her past remained buried in my heart. Yet the shadows of that night never truly faded. Even in the quiet moments, I would glance at her while she slept and wonder, who had placed her in my care? What life had she narrowly escaped? I began to notice the small signs, the way strangers seemed to pause when they saw her, their glances lingering just a moment too long. Once, a woman in the market froze when Anna passed by, her eyes widening in recognition before she hurried away. My blood ran cold. Was it her mother? Or someone else connected to the secret she carried? At night, I would place Anna beside me, tracing the quilt that had wrapped her on that fateful stormy evening, fingers following the delicate stitches, searching for meaning. I whispered promises to her, the same promises I had made 55 years ago. I will keep you safe. I will protect you. One day you will know your story. Yet the mystery grew heavier with each passing year, an invisible thread connecting Anna to someone I had never met. I realized then that the child's past was a living presence, haunting our home, testing my resolve. The quiet life I had imagined vanished, replaced by a subtle tension, an unspoken truth that could unravel everything at any moment. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, a beginning that would culminate decades later, in a knock on my door that would change our lives forever. Anna was growing quickly now, her laughter filling the small farmhouse with life I hadn't known it could hold. Yet every giggle carried an unspoken question, one she was too young to ask, and one I was too fearful to answer. That note from 55 years ago still rested in the drawer, worn and yellowed, a constant reminder of a promise I had made in the dead of a stormy night. I would protect her. I would keep her safe. But each passing year made me wonder if I had done enough, or if the secrets I kept would one day come crashing down on us both. Raising Anna was a delicate balancing act between love and fear. I adored her, yet every step of her childhood reminded me of the burden I carried. I taught her how to read, how to tend the garden, how to face the world with quiet strength. But I shielded her from the past, knowing that the truth of her origins could shatter everything we had built. The quilt she arrived in remained carefully folded, kept in a cedar chest beneath my bed. Occasionally I would take it out, tracing the faded embroidery with my fingers, searching for hidden meanings, initials, or symbols that might reveal the mother's identity. Each time, my heart ached at the thought of the woman who had left her there, a mother whose circumstances had forced her hand, whose absence haunted us both. Sometimes late at night I would hear a soft whisper in my mind, imagining the mother's voice, a voice filled with regret, love, and longing. I feared that my protection, while keeping Anna safe, might also deny her the connection she had a right to. Each day, the weight of this unspoken truth pressed heavier on my heart, a quiet burden that refused to lift. The first strange encounter happened when Anna was 8. While walking through town, a woman paused to look at her, her eyes wide with recognition, before she quickly turned away. I could see the unease in Anna's small shoulders. She asked me later if the woman was a friend. I hesitated, offering only a gentle, evasive answer. But that day, the weight of the hidden past pressed harder than ever. More clues emerged over time. An old photograph tucked inside a book Anna found at the library, a faded perfume scent that lingered in the quilt, a visitor in town who seemed to study her from afar. Each discovery added to the tension, like invisible threads pulling at the edges of our carefully contained life. The knowledge that someone somewhere knew more than we did filled me with both dread and anticipation. I realized the promise I had made that stormy night was no longer just about protecting Anna's body. It was about shielding her from truths that could shake her world. Yet even as I tried to control her story, fragments of the past seeped through. And deep down, I knew that the day would come when these threads would unravel completely. A knock at the door, a face from long ago, and decades of unanswered questions would demand their answers. That day, I feared, was coming sooner than I expected. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when I first sensed the past reaching into our present. Anna was playing near the edge of the orchard, tossing fallen leaves into the crisp air, laughing without a care. But a flicker of movement caught my eye, a figure standing beyond the fence, watching. I squinted, trying to make out details through the thinning light, but the stranger vanished as suddenly as they appeared. My heart thumped in my chest. Whoever that was, they had been waiting, watching Anna. The weight of the years, the secret of her origins, suddenly felt closer, threatening to unravel everything. I couldn't shake the unease. That night, I checked the locks on every door and window, walking the perimeter of the farmhouse as the wind whispered through the trees. I found nothing. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been near. Yet I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone knew more than they should. Someone who had tracked Anna's life all these years. I returned to the cradle, now empty of its quilted warmth, imagining the tiny hands I had once held in the darkness of a stormy night. The quilt, carefully preserved, seemed almost alive, carrying whispers of its past. Embroidered initials, faded lavender scent, a hint of something I couldn't place. Each detail reminded me of the promise I had made so long ago, and the delicate balance I had maintained between love and secrecy. Every day I wondered, would Anna ever learn the truth? Would the woman who left her come back? And if she did, would I be ready for the storm that followed? The next morning a letter arrived, slipped under the door, its edges frayed and yellowed. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet there was a familiarity in the curl of the letters that made my chest tighten. I unfolded it slowly, careful not to let Anna see. The note was brief. I have not forgotten her. One day she will know. Until then she is safe, and so is my secret. Fear and anticipation collided inside me. Someone had been watching, leaving breadcrumbs in silence. Every small clue, from the perfume on the quilt to the stranger in the orchard, formed a pattern I couldn't yet decipher. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of the past, aware that each discovery could either protect Anna or expose her to danger. I realized then that my promise made decades ago in a storm was no longer just a shield. It was a delicate trap. One wrong move, one unanswered question, and everything we had built could collapse. That night, I sat in the dim light, holding the quilt to my chest, imagining the mother who had left Anna. Did she regret it? Did she dream of her daughter as I had? And most terrifying of all, was she finally coming back to claim what had once been hers? The shadows outside grew longer. The wind whispered secrets through the trees. And deep down, I knew our quiet life had just begun its slow, inevitable unraveling. Anna was no longer a child who could laugh without worry. Even at 12, she carried a quiet restlessness I could feel in every glance and pause. One evening, as I prepared dinner, she wandered into the room holding the old quilt, tracing the faded embroidery with her small fingers. "Why does this smell like someone else?" she asked softly, her voice curious but hesitant. My heart froze. I had hoped she would never ask. Yet the truth was bubbling to the surface, and the delicate web of secrecy I had spun for so long threatened to unravel in her innocent hands. Over the next few weeks, Anna's questions grew sharper. She noticed the faint perfume on the quilt, the embroidery that didn't match anything in our home, and the subtle whispers of the past carried in her mother's absence. I tried to deflect, telling her stories of the stormy night she arrived and how I had found her, but my words felt hollow. She looked at me differently now, with a mix of suspicion, curiosity, and longing I hadn't seen before. Her restlessness was contagious. I began noticing the strangers who lingered near the edge of town, always glancing toward us. A woman with piercing eyes once paused near the market, studying Anna from afar. I felt my pulse quicken, my fear returning full force. The threads of the past were tugging at us, growing stronger and impossible to ignore. Each day I feared she would uncover more than I was ready to reveal, and I wondered how long I could protect her from a truth that had waited decades to emerge. One rainy afternoon, Anna disappeared into the orchard as I hung laundry. I followed quickly, heart hammering, and found her kneeling by the creek, holding the quilt up to the sky. She whispered, "It's like it wants to tell me something, like it remembers someone." My chest tightened. The storm outside mirrored the one that had raged the night she was left on my doorstep. I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. "It's a very special quilt, Anna," I said cautiously. It belonged to someone very important, someone who loved you very much. Her eyes searched mine, fierce and relentless, and I realized she wouldn't be satisfied with half-truths much longer. The feeling that someone was watching intensified. Footsteps in the distance, faint but deliberate, made me glance over my shoulder. A shadow passed along the tree line, vanishing before I could identify it. That night, as Anna slept fitfully, I stared at the quilt folded beside her bed. I understood that the past was no longer dormant. Every question Anna had, every clue we had overlooked, and every shadow lurking beyond the windows was a reminder. The mother who had left her so many years ago had not forgotten. And soon she would come, forcing the secrets we had held for decades into the light. I sank into the rocking chair, holding the quilt to my chest, whispering a silent prayer. The storm of curiosity, fear, and longing was only beginning, and I knew there would be no turning back once the next knock came at our door. The house felt different that week, as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. Anna had grown bolder, her curiosity about her past sharper with each passing day. I tried to keep her close, but the distance between us was widening, an invisible wall built by the secrets I had kept for decades. That night I heard it, a soft rustle outside the window, followed by a faint whisper carried by the wind. My heart raced. Someone was here. Someone from the past that had haunted our lives since the night Anna was left on my doorstep. The days blurred into a tense rhythm of fear and anticipation. I found myself checking every lock, peering into the shadows beyond the porch, and listening to the creak of the floorboards as Anna moved through the house. She asked more questions now, innocent yet probing. Why does the quilt feel so sad sometimes? I swallowed hard, avoiding her gaze. How could I explain the decades of fear, secrecy, and love that had shaped her life? At night I would sit alone, holding the quilt, replaying that stormy evening in my mind. The mother's presence was no longer a distant thought. It was palpable, woven into every stitch of the fabric and every whisper of the wind. I imagined her walking these same paths, watching, worrying, hoping I had done right by her child. Guilt gnawed at me. Had I been a protector, or an impostor in the life of the only daughter she had ever known? Then came the day I could no longer ignore the signs. A package arrived at the doorstep, old, frayed, and unmistakably deliberate. Inside was a letter in handwriting that seemed achingly familiar, each word heavy with longing and regret. I have waited all these years. I feared you might not love her as I did. But I see she is safe. One day I will meet her. Until then, forgive me. My hands shook as I held it. The storm I had tried to ignore for decades had returned. I could no longer pretend that Anna's past was dormant, or that the mother who had left her would remain a distant memory. That evening, Anna wandered into the garden, holding the quilt against her chest. "It's like she's calling me," she whispered. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at me. Protect her, shield her, hide her from the truths she wasn't ready for. Yet I knew that day of reckoning. The knock at the door, the meeting I had both feared and longed for, was drawing near. I sat by the window long after Anna fell asleep, watching the night. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets, regrets, and unspoken love. The quiet life I had built for us was on the edge of unraveling, and soon everything would change. The past had come for us, and I feared it would not leave quietly. It was just past dusk when I heard it, the softest, most deliberate knock at the door. My breath caught in my throat. I froze, every nerve alert. The sound was nothing like the hurried knocks of a neighbor or the playful raps of children. It was deliberate, cautious, yet heavy with urgency. My heart pounded as I moved toward the door, the quilt clutched to my chest like a shield. Could it be her? The woman who had left Anna on my doorstep all those years ago? Every instinct screamed that the past had finally come calling. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. The knock came again, this time a single, soft tap, almost hesitant. Outside, the fading light revealed a figure. A woman, older than I remembered in my imagination, fragile but with a presence that commanded attention. Her eyes, wide and glistening, searched the porch as if seeking reassurance, then fixed on the quilt I held. Anna, sensing my tension, crept behind me. I whispered her name, urging her to stay quiet. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence between knocks stretching unbearably. I remembered the letters, the hints, the shadows that had been watching us for years. They all led to this moment. Every heartbeat felt like a drum, counting down the seconds before the truth would demand to be faced. The woman finally spoke, her voice trembling yet soft. I think you have her. My hand shook, my fingers tightening on the doorframe. Her. You mean Anna? I whispered, my voice barely audible. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I left her with you, all those years ago. I never stopped thinking, never stopped hoping. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The weight of decades pressed down on us. The stolen years, the secrets, the questions that had haunted every quiet evening. Anna's small hand appeared on my arm, her eyes wide with confusion and dawning recognition. The quilt I held suddenly felt heavier, carrying not just warmth but the weight of two women's love, guilt, and longing intertwined across 55 years. The stranger took a step forward, her hands trembling, reaching out as though afraid her daughter might vanish. I had no choice, she whispered. I had to protect her, and I thought she would be safe with you. My chest tightened. Everything I had done to shield Anna, to keep her life stable, now collided with the raw, aching truth. That night, the three of us stood on the porch, the darkness outside and the storm of emotions within intertwining. The mother had returned. The past was no longer silent. And for the first time in decades, Anna was confronted not just with questions, but with the living, breathing answers she had been waiting for. Answers that would change all our lives forever. Anna's eyes widened as she saw the woman step onto the porch. Everything shifted. The air, the shadows, even the quilt I held between us felt suddenly heavier, charged with decades of longing. The stranger knelt slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for Anna, her voice barely above a whisper. I am the one who left you, all those years ago. I had no choice, but I never stopped loving you. Anna froze, her small fingers clutching the quilt, her lips parting in disbelief. The words hung in the night air, fragile and impossible, yet undeniable. The rain from earlier had left a sheen on the porch, reflecting the dim light of the lantern I had lit. The mother's face, lined with decades of sorrow, told stories words could not. Every wrinkle, every tear-streaked mark whispered of loss, regret, and a love that had never faded. Anna's breath came in short, shaky gasps. Why? She finally asked, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and anger. I was young, trapped, and I feared for your life, the mother admitted. I couldn't raise you safely. I prayed that someone kind would find you. And I prayed it would be you. My heart ached as I watched Anna process this, her small body trembling with emotions she had never known she carried. The quilt, once a simple bundle of warmth, had transformed into a symbol of survival, love, and secrets finally emerging from the shadows. The air between them pulsed with tension, uncertainty, and fragile hope. Anna stepped forward slowly, her gaze fixed on the woman who had been a mystery her entire life. You left me, she whispered, the quilt slipping slightly from her arms. The mother's tears fell freely. I had no choice. I thought I was saving you. I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped dreaming of this moment. I stayed silent, letting them speak, letting the past and present collide in real time. Every detail, the stormy night 55 years ago, the quilt, the letters, the hidden notes, culminated here. Anna's hands trembled as she touched the mother's, hesitant yet drawn by something deep within her. I don't understand, Anna said, her voice thick with emotion. You will, the mother said softly, gripping her hands. And I hope one day you can forgive me. The words hung in the quiet night, heavy with the weight of decades. Anna's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of heartbreak and awe. I felt the room shrink, the world narrowing to this single moment, the meeting of mother and daughter, decades apart, yet bound by love, pain, and secrets finally exposed. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the echoes of a stormy night long ago. But now, for the first time, the storm was not just outside. It was inside, stirring emotions, uncovering truths, and setting the stage for a life forever changed. Anna sat on the porch steps, gripping the quilt tightly, her small frame shaking with a storm of emotions she could barely name. The woman before her, the mother she had never known, looked older than Anna had imagined, her eyes heavy with decades of regret and longing. "Tell me everything," Anna whispered, voice quivering. The words felt like a plea, a challenge, and a surrender all at once. I watched silently, my chest tight, knowing this was the moment the past and present collided, the moment the life we had built and the life that had been lost would meet in fragile, trembling clarity. The mother took a slow breath, glancing at me briefly before speaking. "When I left you that night, I had no choice. Your safety, it was all that mattered. I was young, scared, trapped in a life I couldn't escape. I thought I'd never see you again." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, voice breaking. "I tried," the mother whispered. "I searched, I wrote letters I never sent. Every day I hoped someone kind, someone like her," she said, nodding at me, "would raise you with love. And she did. You were safe, but my heart broke every day I couldn't hold you." Anna's small hands reached for the mother's, tentative at first, then gripping tightly, as though trying to feel the years they had both lost. The quilt slipped from Anna's arms as she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to the mother's chest. Tears streamed freely. "I thought I was alone," Anna whispered. "I never knew. I never understood." The mother held her close, shivering as decades of regret and longing poured out. I felt the weight of 55 years in that embrace. Years of secrets, of protection, of stolen time. The night air was thick with silence, punctuated only by soft sobs. Finally, Anna lifted her head, looking from her mother to me, her eyes wide with comprehension. "You both saved me," she said, voice trembling. "In different ways you both loved me. And now, I think I can forgive you both." The mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, as if the very act of being forgiven was more than she had dared hope for. I realized then that the past, though painful, had led to this fragile, beautiful moment, the reunion of hearts broken by time, restored by love and understanding. The wind rustled the trees outside, carrying away decades of silence. For the first time in 55 years, the storm had passed. Yet the echoes of the past lingered, soft and tender, reminding us that even the deepest heartbreaks could lead to moments of grace and belonging. The morning sun poured through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the farmhouse. Anna sat between the two women who had shaped her life. Me, the one who raised her, and her mother, the one who had never stopped loving her from afar. The quilt lay folded on the table, no longer a symbol of mystery, but of survival and love across decades. Anna's small hand rested in hers mother's, and for the first time, the tension that had haunted all of us began to ease. The storm of secrets, heartbreak, and unanswered questions was finally giving way to understanding. Over breakfast, Anna listened as her mother spoke of her past, the choices she had been forced to make, the sacrifices that had kept her daughter safe. I watched, silent but grateful, as Anna's eyes softened, her small fingers tracing the lines of the quilt that had carried the echoes of history. Questions had been answered, but the depth of emotion was overwhelming. Grief for lost time, relief that the mystery was finally unveiled, and a budding hope that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Anna laughed softly at a story her mother told, and I felt my heart swell. The mother's presence was no longer a threat or a shadow. It was a bridge to the past, connecting two lives that had been intertwined long before any of us had imagined. The air was lighter now, filled with tentative smiles, whispered apologies, and the fragile beginning of forgiveness. That afternoon, we walked together through the orchard, the wind carrying the scent of late-blooming flowers. Anna ran ahead, carefree, yet glancing back to ensure her mother and I were close. The mother and I exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had traveled, from heartbreak, secrecy, and decades of longing, to this fragile reconciliation. The mother knelt in the grass, picking up a fallen leaf. "I never wanted to lose you," she whispered, holding it out to Anna. Anna took it carefully, her eyes shining. You didn't, she said simply. You just had to wait. I felt tears sting my eyes. 55 years of hidden sorrow and unspoken love had culminated in this single perfect moment of understanding. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the three of us stood together on the porch, the quilt draped across Anna's shoulders, a tangible reminder of the storms we had weathered and the love that had endured. The past was no longer a shadow. It was a story, a memory, a connection that would shape the rest of our lives. The door, once a barrier to mystery and pain, now framed a scene of hope, forgiveness, and healing. Anna's laughter echoed across the farmhouse and orchard, a sound I had longed to hear for decades. The storm was gone. The hearts that had once been broken were mending, slowly but surely, and the dawn of a new life stretched before us, full of promise, love, and finally peace.